Let's start. Rachel, yes, Rachel.
Yeah.
You know, she was intending coming.
Oh, I don't know, I'm afraid. I think, as we probably know, she's.
Yeah. Well, we knew the vote was on, but I
Yeah.
don't think, did we have any apologies from Rachel? No, okay.
I can see, well, I'm talking out of turn, but I can see she would have been intended to come because this is the one that she was really quite interested in. So
Yeah.
I would have thought she might have been thinking, well, I might be able to get it.
I mean, she could, yeah, she could.
Well, let's wait and see.
Be on the way.
Yeah. Okay.
Get it over quick.
Let's get it over quick. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the evening's meeting of the Local Development Framework Subcommittee on the 10th of September. Firstly, evacuation procedure. I'm not aware that there is an evacuation plan, so if you do hear the fire alarm, it is a genuine alarm, and obviously leave through the nearest fire escape, which is the back. Can't leave that way, then out the front door. And I don't know who the senior officer is tonight who will take Mike's senior officer tonight, so please make sure that Mike's recorded you before you leave. Do not just walk away. Apologies for absence. Members of unofficial business. Councillor Humphreys couldn't attend, and Councillor Bates is substituting. And Councillor Taylor, we're not sure whether she'll be back on time, but we've not had official apologies, so we can only assume that she's going to try and get here. Has anyone got any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests on anything on the agenda?
Joe, I reach you to say yes, but in all the 30 years I've been with cats, I've never had any once.
Thanks. Thanks, Mark. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from the previous meeting on the 24th of July? Are we happy with those? Proposed Councillor Ridley, seconder.
I wasn't there, but
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll second them then because I was there. Okay. I presume if you wasn't there, can we go all in favour? Because everyone happy to accept them then. Okay, thank you. I will record those, sign those. Okay, first item on the agenda this evening is the Birmingham Local Plan, preferred options regulation 18, consultation July 2024.
Thank you, Chair. Assuming I'm loud enough.
Yeah, over to you.
Ross? Yes, as members will be aware, the Birmingham City Local Plan is being revised currently. This stage, Regulation 18 precedes the Regulation 19, which I'm assuming they are going to go out for consultation early in the new year, because the intention is they have to have it submitted to Department of Local Government by June 2025. So this is part of that process. As you will see from the summary responses at the end of the report, the primary concern, and I give apologies now that I imagine indicated it may have been a little bit too detailed on the numbers, but the priority concern is that despite improvements in housing delivery since the original local plan, there is still a significant unmet need. This Regulation 18 plan has stated they've gone into detail on areas of density, site redevelopment, this is the employment sites, regeneration sites, and other opportunities to try and increase numbers. However, you will note on paragraph 3.10 that despite improved supply indicated in paragraph 3.9, we are still in a situation where the housing shortfall, which was 78,415 post the previous local plan, has now gone down to 46,153. So there is still a significant unmet need for this plan and the plan period it covers. The biggest issue I identified from the plan, however, is that in going through those attempts to increase supply and delivery, the increase in supply in terms of opportunities, for instance, in Greenbelt, was not carried forward. They looked at the current Greenbelt situation. They looked at the Greenbelt review that had been undertaken in 2013, and they considered that that was sufficient. That is the prime objection that the planning side we are raising to the plan, is that that isn't sufficient. That's unacceptable to take that approach. And I would particularly make reference to that in light of the final report on this committee, which is the NPPF changes. And that if they are going to carry that approach forward, we should be objecting, because then if we are in a situation at the regulation 19 and the submission stage where there is still a significant unmet need and they haven't addressed that, and they haven't looked at all opportunities to address that, then effectively we will be saying, well, we're not prepared to consider through the duty to cooperate accommodating any further unmet need over and above that we have already accommodated from the previous local plan, which, as you may or may not know, was 3,917 dwellings. So there is a significant issue with the Birmingham local plan, and I'm happy to take further comments from members if needs be.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Chair. A question first, and then William and I have got a bunch of comments. But the first question really is this 40,000 number, or 46,153, is that the new number that government are coming up with, or is that the
No,
old number?
that is a difficulty. It is under the previous approach. It's only 2042, so obviously there are other figures coming out beyond that over the Birmingham unmet need. So there's that issue, that it is under the previous housing requirement approach, and effectively, yes, they, even though they have, and I'm not discounting the fact that they have improved delivery, they've been able to get additional funding to bring forward the brownfield site. But in light of the changes proposed currently, we don't think that they can ignore Greenbelt. And to give a similar situation for our own circumstances, as you're aware, we are doing the Employment Development Plan, TPD, and as part of the evidence base for our Regulation 18 consultation, we are undertaking a focused Greenbelt review, particularly based on the strategic road corridors. So effectively, we're asking them to do what we are doing and what any other authority would be expected to do under the emerging guidance as well.
Well, I'm delighted we're having a Greenbelt review, because I think a significant proportion of our northern parishes need to have Greenbelt protection. So if we are looking at Greenbelt to do more, then I'm perfectly happy. If we're looking at Greenbelt to do less, I'm rather less happy with it. Chairman, my questions really come back to all those years ago when we agreed to take some housing under the then duty to cooperate with Birmingham. And there were lots of good reasons why we were doing that. But as soon as we'd done it, I remember a massive amount of concern being raised that Birmingham's numbers were illusory. And there were lots of things saying, well, actually, Birmingham, you've so past all this need. But a lot of people are saying, actually, it's nowhere near that. There were significant questions. So my first question to Birmingham is, look, how do you support this number? Whether it's the bigger one, the lower number, a third number, how can we get comfort that actually the housing numbers that you're coming forward with are credible? And secondly, in terms of the growth areas, I think in the report it says they're forecasting growth based on historical patterns. Now, we've heard that nonsense before from consultants talking to us about what we should be forecasting growth on. It's got to be based on something more tangible, because all I've heard before is some of this stuff is a proxy for development. So it's bogus. Is there any evidence that Birmingham's numbers are more credible than what they were before? And I'd be delighted if they are. But, you know, accepting that, the government made it abundantly clear, actually, that whatever that number is, it's going to go up, because the government has quite reasonably, as the new government set out its plans where it wants to go, and that's more housing for whatever reason. So it's sort of, given what the government is saying in Agenda Item 7, they're not going to be able to go ahead with this plan anyway, because the government's making it clear if you haven't got to examination, well, you're not going to get to it unless you change the numbers. So does it really matter what they're saying at this stage, because it's going to change? Then in respect to the Greenbelt release, no, I'm really uncomfortable with that. And I'm uncomfortable with it because we have got Birmingham building bits of Greenbelt from Solihull this way and Langley Sue the other way. We can't really say it like this, but perfectly happy for them to review their Greenbelt everywhere aside from not near to us. And if you like, I don't know closely enough where they have reviewed Greenbelt in the past, but two significant areas of development have been on our border without one suggestion of how traffic and everything else which comes from those development sites into North Warwickshire is going to be addressed. I'm not saying not in my backyard, full stop, not in my backyard until you show me the infrastructure can deal with it, and actually that you are protecting the environment. We try to set ourselves up in a long way for being the green lungs for the conurbation. Good aspiration. But not if it's clogged up with cars in every direction, because, their answer, I'm perfectly happy with increasing densities, more active public sector land assembly, further comprehensive housing regeneration, utilising poor quality land, and releasing some employment for housing. I think they're all absolutely fine. Greenbelt to me has got to be absolutely the last, because pretty much the roads and the infrastructure going through it is suitable for a tractor. It's not, Peddymore, when you look at it, all the roads around there is some improvement. But the areas coming into Middleton and Kirkworth, that I'm not seeing any improvement. The suggestions of improving the motorway junction, I may have misremembered, but my recollection is roads the same, we're just going to paint white lines in a different place, and that will increase capacity because you've got 4 lanes rather than 3. Doesn't actually do it because the motorway and the other roads are still full anyway. So whilst releasing Greenbelt to an extent I can see bigger threats for us in that, and without a fully costed, funded infrastructure improvement to it, we just get the thick end of it again. So Birmingham, I think, sort your numbers out, get your new numbers based on what the government is telling you you've got to do, and actually accommodate your own growth.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ridley.
Thanks.
It's not working.
Isn't it working? I'll shout. There's not many others in it. I concur, but the only thing I would like to see as well, I don't know if this would be possible, Mike, is it says at 312 about, it looks like Greenbelt strategy is Greenbelt review is the last on their list,
Yes.
effectively. But they do have an awful lot of brownfield sites in Birmingham, loads. You can only drive through, you can see them from the Spaghetti Junction, you can see them as you drive through to the other side. There is so much brownfield site. And I know there was a big drive from the previous government, and I think this government, in relation to the utilisation of brownfield sites and trying to help developers in order to deliver them. And that was a big drive. But it can't just be, good words, not bon and me, and nothing happens. Because surely, if we value our green spaces and our biodiversity net gain enhancements and achievements, they've got to look at this brownfield site first. So I'd want to know what exactly are they looking at? The employment land that they've got that they want to use for housing, the housing regeneration in looking at the brownfield, the old factory sites near the canals, near the railway, because there is so much of it. There is so much of it, and there's lots of cities across Europe that have actually done regeneration of all their brownfield around their cities, and it's been delivered really successfully. So thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just thought to sort of echo what Davina said, really. The amount of brownfield sites in Birmingham especially would have an economic development effect as well on some of the more deprived parts of Birmingham if the opportunity was taken up. And if you read through the report, obviously there are some points that are fixed and are going to remain the same no matter what government is there. I can't see it changing that much. But some of the facets of this will change. And Birmingham saying, well, we've done all we can, doesn't appear to me to be, well, we've done all we can. I think there is, as illustrated, a lot more that they could be looking at. It doesn't seem to mention any of that really in this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm back to Councillor Simpson. He put his hand up, and then I'll come to you, Councillor.
Completely agree. Actually, I've missed the point entirely on the economic benefits of redeveloping it. Spot on, really. You know what I mean? They can actually make a better life for a lot of people by it's where a lot of people live anyway. So there is that huge, I would have thought, need. But we'll go back onto this in the last item. It's all very well as saying to an extent you've got to do it, and government saying we've got to do it, unless government's going to put some cash in to enable the infrastructure. And we've seen that ourselves, you know. Without the government-led infrastructure funded stuff, it gets really, really difficult. So I sort of understand Birmingham, but actually in an urban area where you've got a significant population, there are significant advantages societally for doing what you said. You know, and I would much rather, if you like, look at a smaller number of sites and really throw the infrastructure at it, make it better. And a lot of what the government, I think, is saying in the last item is a universal plan across the country, and I think there's a lot of common sense in that. But at the minute, I'm sort of hearing things on transport from the Combined Authority Mayor and other people, and I'm not actually hearing that it's joined together. Because, you know, there's a great opportunity if you're going to extend the tramway, put in new stations. That is really where you need to focus the additional housing to get, you know, most bang for the buck in terms of, you know, we're putting in a lot of money to extend the railway and the tramway. Well, equal that too, because then that starts to work better. So completely agree.
Councillor Bates.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to echo what's been said really. I mean, definitely around the brown belt, but also the infrastructure. You know, I think, you know, that has to be a top priority as well as the housing. We've already got, you know, issues with our own infrastructure around schools and transport, etc. So adding more pressure on the boundary areas is going to be really significant. I think it'd be also interesting to know what Birmingham's doing with many of the properties and the homes that they've got that are in very poor disrepair and needs to be brought back, rather than spending lots of money on just keep, you know, building and redeveloping when there's a massive housing stock that is in poor repair or not even being able to be let because of the condition of it. So it'll be interesting to know what Birmingham's plans are to do some sort of work on that, on those properties, because there's a vast amount of them in Birmingham.
Any other comments? Mike, do you want to come back on something?
Thank you, Chair. It was just to respond briefly to the councillors, some of the comments, just to highlight a couple of points. What I am intending to do with your comments just raised today is not only do that in a response to Birmingham as a formal response with the letter and this committee report, but I'll be adding those to them, obviously. But in addition, we'll be raising those issues at the meeting, because we are chasing a meeting with the senior officer at City Council, specifically to address some of these issues. So that's very useful, and I'll make sure all those points are raised. I would also sort of raise the issue, or make members aware that potentially part of the fact that they did get improved delivery over the last few years is because the previous mayor district did manage to get significant amounts of funding from central government. So effectively, we are in a bit of a limbo situation until we know whether that is going to continue. It would be interesting to watch that to see whether similar levels of funding, because if you want to get development on brownfield sites, you need that incentive funding to overcome the market's resistance to them, because the cost If that doesn't happen, then we are going to be in a why not situation. And particularly for the infrastructure, I will reinforce that. I didn't cover that point as detailed in the report, because partially when I read the plan, to me it didn't really look like a new plan. It looked more like a reiteration of the existing plan with a few additional policies thrown in. But there didn't seem to me, the reiteration of Langby Sue, the reiteration of Peddymore, a few of the brownfield sites that we've already known previously, but there didn't seem to be, whether you call it a fresh approach or a more intensive approach. It was we're doing it again. We're not going any further forward. And the only comment in terms of how they will address that unmet need was further discussions will be held with the joint authorities as part of the combined authority discussions, which doesn't really help because it gives us no clear direction. It gives us no clear reassurance, which is clearly what the members here are simply seeking. So I'll make sure we stress that to them because we're concerned as well.
Thank you. Yes.
One other thing I forgot, Chairman. Not that long ago, I can't remember the name of the group, but a part of Birmingham were saying, not that they bothered consult us on it, they were going to rebuild the A38. And they were going to put a lot of money into, to begin with, a new A38, then a rebuilt A38. And if that was going to happen, you can just see the costs of rebuilding or a new road having to be met. I mean, we all know you put a road in anyway. What comes with it? Houses both sides or factories both sides to fund the cost. My concern then is if they're looking at the review of the Greenbelt, they're putting in significant infrastructure on the A38. Where is that housing going to go? And we cop it again.
Thank you. Now, I think they're all really valid comments, and I think they're concerns that we quite rightly have. They've got this number 46,000. It's appropriate to say, where did that come from? What's the science behind that number? And all of the comments about where they then look to develop. I think what's really clear for this council, for this authority, is that we have our own challenges. We can't take everyone's pain because they say, well, we can't meet our need. Well, that's for you to review and to be a bit more innovative about where you look. Look at your brownfield site. Look at the greyfield, got a lot of grey belt as it's now, as a new phrase has come out. Have that conversation. So, but I think the recommendation is that we take a note of the consultations taking place, and that our observations, potential impacts in the report be endorsed. Now, I think I've got a bit from we've been saying endorsed. I don't think we endorse the recommendations. We acknowledge the report, but we want to raise those points, Mike, if you could, and take that back to them and ask those questions and get some answers.
Yeah.
So with that slight change of saying, rather than saying it's endorsed, saying acknowledged, do I have a proposer? Councillor Bates, secondly Councillor Osborne, all those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is a similar conversation, slightly different. It's the Hinckley and Bosworth local plan review. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Again, similar situation, the need to get a local plan review before the deadline date under the old system, which is June of 2025. Hinckley and Bosworth, similar to ourselves at the previous situation with Birmingham, Hinckley and Bosworth have agreed as part of the statement of common ground with the other Leicester authorities to accommodate some of Leicester's unmet need. A direct result of that is the options in their Regulation 18 consultation, which includes two main significant sites that potentially impact on operation. One is it's an expansion of the land northwest of Myra up to Penny Drayton. I've forgotten the name of the farm, it's mentioned in the report. But to target that effectively similar to a new village approach, we are looking at 3,000 plus dwellings and that's on the A444 from the Redgate north and east up to Myra and up to Penny Drain. That's the first issue, the first site we need to be aware of. The second site is at the Long Shoot, and it's north of the A5 at the Long Shoot junction, up to and just before Higham Lane junction and roundabout. That site is not for housing, it's for strategic employment. Predominantly, it will be logistics. Now, the plan does include an A5 improvement policy and an A5 investment policy. However, what we don't have from either of those proposals is any clear indication of how the impact on the highway network will be addressed. So again, we're back to the infrastructure funding. The existing infrastructure, we already know, because it's been through the A5 partnership approach, where they've highlighted the implication of Long Shoot and that whole stretch between the M69 and the M42. Regional investment strategy for road investment strategy, it's not including a project for the Long Shoot, because they said the previous project they had was not best value. So we're now in a situation where we have no programmed or planned improvements. We know they are looking at the situation, but there are no programmed or planned improvements. We have two significant strategic allocations as part of the regulation 18 consultation. And the next big issue, notwithstanding the simple fact that we all are aware that the A5 capacity cannot accommodate the scale of development proposed, it is the impact that may have and probably will have on North Warwickshire in terms of our existing local plan. We are seeking reassurances as a result of this proposal from Hinckley that they are either going to undertake work to analyse that impact or will require the policies to either fund improvements required so that it doesn't have an impact. Because if we lose significant capacity on the A5 and we don't get funding agreed or the route investment strategy through National Highways, they decide there isn't the need for further improvements, runs the risk that it may basically prevent our sites coming forward. There's an issue with this timing, I suppose, is one way you can say it. We have a significant proposal at Portsmouth within our local plan and at Addison, both of which are predicated on getting infrastructure improvements to the A5. We know there's some funding there, but we're awaiting response on whether there's going to be any further funding to basically accommodate the inflation and interest rate additional costs following COVID and following previous circumstances. If that funding isn't forward, and if this site comes forward or these sites are agreed without any clear indication of how the infrastructure will be paid for, we won't have the capacity to deliver the local plan. And then we're in a very difficult situation in that we will then also be expected to undertake a local plan review, yet we will still have the housing figures that we previously agreed to make in Birmingham. So we'll be hit by, in our eyes, a double whammy. So our main concern is we're quite happy with Leicestershire dealing with its own needs and with the Leicestershire authorities dealing with Leicester's unmet needs. But we have significant concerns over the impact both the location of these sites will have on the A5 infrastructure and the infrastructure needs that we rely on, the infrastructure improvements that we need to deliver our local plan. And that's where the focus currently in terms of our response to the local plan is. But I am aware there are probably a significant number of other issues members may wish to raise, particularly relating to the A5 and the potential and the current work that's ongoing there as well. So I'll come back to members.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, and the recommendation here again is to note, and you says note and agree the observations, so we can agree the observations, but again, I think I'll take other members' questions, but I think we have concerns about the potential impact on our plan by this, which you've just alluded to.
Yes.
Questions? Councillor Simpson.
Thank you. I'm sorry to disappoint Mr. Devon. I haven't got any new areas, but a lot more on what he just said. Yeah, I genuinely have significant concerns on the net result on our ability to deliver our plan. And I can well understand the argument being that actually a substantial amount of this traffic will go south to the M69, but I really don't believe all of it will. What I'd like to understand more is Hinkley and Bosworth helping Nuneaton with their need, because from what I understand, they're pretty well full. And actually, this is planting a lot of houses, a new village on the edge of Nuneaton. And that will itself, I mean, Hinkley and Bosworth is a fairly big borough. They're trying to meet the need for Leicester. Something a bit closer to Leicester might have been a better idea than right on the edge of Nuneaton. But my concern, I generally think all of that is for them to determine, because I generally wouldn't try and tell a neighbouring authority where I thought they should put the houses. What I am really concerned about, though, is the impact on the A5, and that impact then on our ability to deliver our plan, and not wishing to get into a situation of who approves the development first. Because there is a substantial risk that what's left of the capacity, certainly, or so it's all but 100%, if they were to move ahead sooner than we can, because we are so dependent upon government funding for the A5, then we could end up being very much squeezed. And that, I think, to my mind, is such a strategic threat that I wouldn't wish to be saying to Hinkley that we broadly support your plan. I would be sort of saying, boy, if you carry on with this, we will object. There's no doubt about it. We will object, and you need to understand that. So there may be lots of areas in here that we can broadly support, but this strategic development on the A5, without infrastructure, without scheduling it in line with what we are trying to achieve, will lead to an objection, and we will maintain that. There are a couple of other bits, really. I'd like to understand more about the West Midlands strategic employment land study, because I think when we looked at it before from the LEP and the previous one, I don't think Hinkley and Bosworth were necessarily included in there. And yet here we've got 47 hectares, which, to my mind, must be helping to contribute to the need in the West Midlands. They're just on the edge of it, but this is going to be close to the M69, M1, and not that far from the M42. So I could sort of get myself into feeling more warm and fuzzy about that 47 hectares of B8 there, if that actually helped to release the pressure on sites in North Warwickshire. But I think it sort of doesn't count because it's outside, and therefore we get some of the negative impact from traffic going up the A5 to the M42 without any relief on the numbers that allegedly we're going to have to produce. So it's like a double hit. Number one, we're at risk of our plan becoming undeliverable and getting the traffic anyway. And all that is saying, Chairman, I think we object.
Chair, can I just respond on that particular note? You are basically right, because the strategic need that the Hinkley site is addressing for it is the East Midlands strategic need. They are now in a situation that we were in, because they had originally undertaken a strategic site study, or a strategic employment needs study, sorry. They are now in the position where they have figures that they have to address, so they are undertaking within the East Midlands, from Nottingham down to Leicester, a further study similar to what we've been through. And that's actively going on as we speak, and this is addressing that need. So that means effectively, because we are on border with the West Midlands, East Midlands, that even though we know quite categorically that the traffic will be going at A5, it won't be going round the back and up Higham Lane and out beyond. It will be coming through the A5 and it will be heading either to the M69 or it will be heading to the M42. I can't see any other reason. So that's where the real concern is over the implications on the capacity and the impact on us. And we will still have the West Midlands requirement hitting us that we have to address through the employment scheme. So absolutely, it is 100% correct. We are in that awkward position, hence why we want to know what are they going to do. There are options that they perhaps could themselves, as we've done in our earlier local plan, where we looked for a bypass around Grendon to address through the reserve site the issues of the A5 from Grendon roundabout to Atherstone. They have a 49 hectare site here, immediately behind Aldi from McDonald's, as I said, just up to the end of the housing before you get to the higher main junction. I've suggested in there that there could be opportunity for them looking at including that within the plan. So they address the need, but at the moment it isn't clear, there isn't any need addressed, and it is fairly limited in what they say, how they're going to address that need. We've always been told in our previous discussion with the National Highways, for instance, on the housing side particularly, that they are unlikely on their own to have sufficient funding to address the scale of the improvements required, and it will require public funding. But there's no indication in here that that's what they're going to look for. So whether it's, and I mentioned this earlier, whether it's slightly tongue-in-cheek that they are, for want of a better word, what we did with our local plan to some extent, forcing the issue, creating a situation where the A5 will fall down, I don't know. And that may be an accusation one step too far, but whichever, without that addressing our existing adopted plan, as you said, scheduling an approach so that ours gets delivered, then we are in a difficult situation if we say nothing.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think you really don't want to be getting into who can get their planning first on the A5. That's sort of massively desperate times. I think we all know that the A5, even as it is now, is suffering and creaking at the seams without that type of approach. I mean, we talk a lot about the duty to cooperate with housing. There should be a duty to cooperate with the infrastructure first to go along with the housing, I think. That would see a sensible course of action, because I don't think any of these things can be delivered properly without that in place. It will not. It just will not work. Those 3,000 houses is 6,000 cars. No, they're not all going to be going that way. It's just not going to happen like that. And then the other associated transport that goes with that when we put our plans in. So really, I think there should be a duty to talk and cooperate on getting the infrastructure right from all councils involved before any development can go ahead.
Councillor Ridley.
I agree with what Mike said, but I think it's incumbent on the government, isn't it, to try and stump up some money. They had said that they were pulling certain things, pulling certain road infrastructure projects and pulling this, that and the other, but how can you get growth without the infrastructure? So I think it's down to people to try and push to get the funding for that sort of thing, because it makes everybody miserable. Yes, Mike, I agree with you. Yeah, it was forced. Well said. But it was forced with the understanding that the money was forthcoming or was there. And of course, circumstances have changed. Prices have gone up. One government has sort of like borrowed from Peter to pay Paul and vice versa. But it is incumbent upon them to try and do something with our infrastructure, because we all live in the middle of it. And it to me personally, it does seem like a race, a bit like wacky races, who can get there first, who can deliver first. I'm the archetype jugglebug. Thank you.
Any other comments? And again, I think very valid comment. Really concerning that if it is that race. But I think as we come back to another time, it's that infrastructure question. Because actually, if you look at the sites, in many ways, you go, with some of the other pressures we have on employment sites and that, so it's the lesser of evils, but the infrastructure has to work and has to be fixed. Otherwise, it's counterproductive, certainly for us and certainly for our plan, which is something that we we are not here, and I know we have the duty to cooperate, but as an authority, we are not here to kind of sort out other people's problems. So with that in mind, the recommendation is that we note, and it says agree the observations raised in the Hinckley and Bosworth local plan, and that any additional comments are forwarded to them for comment. So do I have a proposer, Councillor Simpson? Are you proposing or questioning?
No, broadly happy with that, so long as we are raising the risk probability that we're going to object if they don't do something. I think, you know, we have to be upfront with Hinckley and say, look, you know, if you don't do this, there's no else.
I think that's perfectly reasonable to say, yeah, you know, we've done. However, you know, if you do not have something with the infrastructure, we will have to object.
Yeah.
I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Well, we will happily object.
So are you proposing that?
Oh, I am. I'm very happy for you to happily.
Are you proposing?
I'll propose that.
That's a second. So Ridley, all those in favour? Thank you, that's carried.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, now the next one is really agenda item 7 is about the proposed changes to the National Planning Policy Framework and other changes to the planning system. Now, I know this is technically, I mean, Jeff's report to Steve, isn't it? So Mike will help out where he can, but Mark, you may well have more knowledge on this than many of us in the room. So the recommendation of this is that the views contained in the attached appendix report and any additional comments by members be sent to government by the consultation deadline of the 24th of September. And as people are aware, this is the proposed changes by the Deputy Prime Minister to the planning framework.
Thank you. So at the last planning and development report, we looked at the report that this appendix to. I think our recommendation was that a detailed comment should be shared with Councillor Phillips, Councillor Ridley and myself for agreement and finalisation. I think what I'd say is, I mean, actually, you know, that should be extended to Councillor Osborne and yourself as well, so that it's, if you like, a joint response from planning development and LDF. I think there are, inevitably, the government's come with, you know, they've been elected, they have their plan, and they will want quite reasonably to see that developed. I think it's our job to say, look, we had a bunch of concerns with the previous lot's plan. We actually have some concerns here too. And I think, you know, fundamentally, it does come down to, it's fine having these suggestions, and there are a lot of, you know, needs and aspirations, but unless the infrastructure is there and the funding is there to make it work, that's not going to happen, is it? So what is, I think, for me, the most fundamental concern is this question of a grey belt rather than green belt. Because if you go back to the 60s, we had the issue then of planning flight, where people would quite deliberately let their land, buildings, property become a complete tip in the expectation they would then get consent to do what they wanted. I am slightly wary that grey belt, whilst I don't think it's the government's intention to do that, will lead to more of an issue of, well, it's a right mess, isn't it? Let's deal with it. I think the government are absolutely right saying you ought to be brownfield first. But it's almost like we were saying with Birmingham, you really have to maximise what you're doing with that. And my concern is there were a number of reasons why Greenbelt was put in place. It got nothing to do with keep it pretty. It was all about stopping linear development out of the cities along the lines and actually best use of land, creating an environment where people in urban areas could get into areas with fresh air and space and actually have a better life. I think that is still really the case. If anything, it's more important now because the cities are more crammed and we are building more high-rise developments. So you actually, I think, even more need green lungs on the edge of the conurbation because there's more people in there and there's less space to do it. So I think our sort of broad plan of being the green lungs for the edge of the conurbation is more important now than it ever was. And the idea that some of that will be under pressure is worrying, particularly because one of our particular bits of Greenbelt that's most critical has had 2 motorways and a railway planted in it. So it's actually not as green, it's not as fresh air as it was. So Greenbelt really does give me concerns. What I read in here was review your Greenbelt. What I didn't read was review your Greenbelt. But if you're giving up some Greenbelt, actually create some more, because the need for that protection hasn't gone away. There are other needs, and clearly we have to recognise it, but it's bothering me. The other thing I'm genuinely bothered about is G on the areas of change. To support economic activity, the government is reviewing, consulting on whether laboratories, gigafactories, data centres, digital economies for freight and logistics will become national infrastructure as opposed to local planning. And we see to an extent that with the government's increased emphasis and increasing the weight that's given to solar farms rather than to everything else. Now, not all, but a bunch of these, like gigafactories, data center, digital economies, actually only work if you can get the power to the site. And the problem with a lot of sites across the country, you can't have a giga center because it's going to be 10 years before you can actually give it enough electricity to make it work. So it's back to infrastructure. But I think, what the government is saying, Andrew Ray said 3 or 4 times in their statement, local decisions and all of that, which clearly we all agree with. But you don't get that if you say, and if you don't do it, I'll do it for you. And actually, I'm going to take these big areas out of local control and put them into a national structure. I think North Warwickshire's experience with this national infrastructure planning, which has been wholly bad, but it's a long way from good. When you look at the decisions that have led this authority to ask for a judicial review and planning appeals on stuff coming out of HS2, the suggestion increasingly that's in my head is national infrastructure gives a broad consent, doesn't do the detail, and it's often the detail that makes it livable for people who've got to put up with it. So
Absolutely.
Everything we look at with HS2 sort of saying to me, actually, I get the strategic need to ensure development, but it really does need a more detailed, closer control of the detail, that once you've accepted, look, it's going to happen there, you actually give local people an opportunity to make sure it works, as opposed to simply it happens. Because in HS2, it's happening, and then everything we raise as an issue is sort of battered aside because actually Parliament has said we can do it anyway, and that's my concern. I think we have to have that degree of local control, even if it is government says, we'll make the big decision, now you make it work. That I think is fair enough, because there's a bunch of these things, frankly, no community wants next to them. It's so overwhelming. But actually, once you've worked within that you're going to have it whether you like it or not, actually make the best of it. And I think that's what we can reasonably do. So there's a bunch of issues in here, but broadly, new government setting out their plan. That's what it's going to be. We get nowhere by saying don't like it, don't want to do it, because where does that get us? It's how do we work with the government to make it better for us. Greenbelt I'm bothered about. Lack of commitment, because there's nothing in here about committing infrastructure. Greenbelt infrastructure and taking more out of the control of local authorities. Those are my principal areas. But very much in the spirit of not want to work with you, because if I don't, you're going to do it to me anyway.
Absolutely, and I think the recommendation to have a joint response from the planning board and this as an LDF subcommittee is a really good one, because the more opinions and the more views we get, the stronger our response will be. So I'm happy with that. I really like your aspirations about being the lungs for the conurbation as that, but we can only be the lungs if we have green spaces. And I do agree with your point that a review of the green belt doesn't just mean taking away some of our existing green belt. It means actually we might add some more green belt, because we've got to maintain the levels of green belt that we have in order to have that aspiration to be the lungs for the conurbation. Any comments, Councillor Osborne?
Yeah, just on the grey belt, really. I do get what Mark or Councillor Simpson is saying about the grey belt. I think there should be some transparency and some indicators with that, because otherwise you could get into a situation where people are letting big plots of land run down. So there has to be some sort of framework that we're working within to make sure that that's not been sort of downgraded and left to become grey belt. So I do think it's right to point an air of caution, but then I think it's equally right to look at it if it is a valid and justified case that grey belt can be used. It just can't get like that.
Yeah.
For the purpose of being used. That's I think the caveat that you were putting in there, and I agree with that.
I think the important thing is previous development, and if you allow a previous development to run down, what it doesn't mean is you can put a 5-bedroom mansion on the site of a shed, for example. You know, it has to be in proportion to what was there previously. See, I do listen.
Well, I've often been accused of not listening, so I'm perfectly happy with that.
So yes, I think it's obviously the recommendation is that that the views contained within the appendix is that we basically respond to the Deputy Prime Minister's letter and recommendations, and I think it's appropriate that we do it as both the Planning Board and the LDF subcommittee.
I think it's important that we are all in it together.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
We're definitely in it.
Yeah. Any other comments? Mark, anything to add or?
No, Chair. I wholly agree with the comments proposed. I did want to raise one issue that I thought it was important for members to be aware of. On Friday, we had notification from the Planning Inspectorate for the Solihull local plan. The inspectorate, we have, if you speak to Jeff, you'll be able to get a copy of the Planning Inspector's letter, but I'm fairly sure, yes it is, it's on the Solihull website now, they have to identify it. The inspector has requested 2 approaches. One is withdrawal of the local plan, partly because of the calculations and the increased housing need, and that Solihull aren't adequately addressing their duty to cooperate and the need or unmet need in Birmingham, as well as their own increasing need. They aren't sufficiently addressing that. And there are issues around that directly relating to the green belt, because part of the refusal to address any further unmet need revolved around further release of the green belt, but also involved regeneration and redevelopment opportunities that the inspector is not clear will deliver the level of growth that Solihull are indicating it should do. So there's a shortfall there. And he's saying in the absence of further work to undertake that is clear and categoric, suggesting withdrawal. The second opportunity is if they wish to continue with the local plan as submitted, he will be indicating that in his view it is unsound. What that effectively means is currently Solihull do not have an up-to-date local plan, and in light of what we've just been discussing with regards to the NPPF and possible changes, we could be on our border in a significant limbo or development open, field day potential. And it would not surprise me if we see a lot of pressures, and it will be along that Solihull boundary. So if anything, that will see the need, hence why we were discussing about the competition to get local plans in quickly, but the need to have a local plan in place.
I think it's a stark warning, isn't it? You know, that they will call in if they see a plan is not deliverable. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, I just got one quick comment before we get to the end of it, but it seems, looking at through this, that it's aspirational. A lot of it, as Mark said, a new government, they're putting their plans in place. A lot of it is, it's sort of aspirational and headings where the detail is yet to come. So we're going to have to wait and see, I think, on some of this, to see what the detail is behind some of these aspirations that have been set out.
I think you're absolutely right, and they are aspirations. Actually, our deliverables, some of them are. You need the detail in order to say whether it's deliverable or not. So, okay, so are we happy that we'll send a joint response proposal?
Well, yes, I will, but it was just two things. One, it's interesting about the issue with Surrey Hill Plan, because in her letter, the Deputy Prime Minister was making it quite clear that the inspector shouldn't waste his time on plans that are not going to get there. And I think he's
Said that.
he said that, you know, it's like you can carry on if you like, but I'll probably not approve it.
He didn't say probably, he actually said, it unsent.
So I think there's a really harsh message there for Solihull. You haven't got a plan, you're going to have problems, so you need to step up and move on with this quickly. But you know, the timescale for them doing that, it's not going to get done, you know, quickly. Starting again is a long process. And actually, to your point, I think, you know, whilst there is of concern, the Prime Minister is making very clear she's going to consult on a lot of this. So it's a time. It's almost like not a time frame or timetable, but she's making it clear the things that we are going to have to consider and think about, and it's a normal consultation that is to follow, which is the right way to do it.
Okay, thank you. So
yes.
Propose it. Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Proposed. Any second there? Councillor Osborne, all those in favour? That's carried. And that's it. Thank you very much. That concludes this evening's meeting. We said 7:30. Look at that.
Very speedily, Chair.